Welcome back, adventurers. Today we're diving headfirst into the glowing, freshly printed pages of Daggerheart, the new fantasy tabletop role-playing game from Critical Role's publishing wing, Darrington Press. This system has had the internet buzzing, but now that the full rulebook is here, it's time to ask the big question: is Daggerheart better than D&D? More specifically, D&D 5e? Let's break down the mechanics, the vibe, and whether this game actually lives up to the hype, or if it's all cloak and daggers. This video won't be a review or breakdown of every mechanic in the game. That would be a different video, and if you're interested, let me know in the video comments below. At the heart of Daggerheart is a simple but elegant innovation: the duality of hope and fear. Every time a player rolls to attempt something, they roll 2 d12s. One represents hope and the other fear. The higher the two determines not just successes or failures, but the emotional tone of the outcome, like a failure with fear, or a failure with hope, a success with hope, or a success with fear. In a way, it inspires growth, resilience, or even camaraderie. It creates a sense of emotional texture that no D20 system really emulates. Interestingly enough, in Daggerheart, the Game Master still uses a D20 with traditional advantage and disadvantage rolls, unlike the players, who will roll with advantage or disadvantage by adding or subtracting the result of a D6. It pulls narrative weight into the dice themselves, not just the result, but the why of that result matters. Your failures aren't just bad luck, they're actually part of the story's arc, and that duality is reinforced throughout the system. Your character literally has a hope meter and a fear meter. You gain points in each through roleplay, through the outcomes of the rolls, and through choices made in fiction. And there are even character abilities that use these as resources to power special abilities. You can spend your hope and tip the odds in your favor. But let fear build too high and you might lose control or spiral. Daggerheart uses these as fuel for everything from abilities to momentary spotlight shifts. And unlike the hit point focused economy of 5e, these emotional resources affect how you engage with the world far more than how many times you can be stabbed. Initiative, turn order, and rounds, those are gone. In their place, Daggerheart uses spotlight-based narration. Players take turns based on what feels right for the flow of the scene, and the DM can spend fear to interrupt after a player has rolled. It's not about who rolled the highest number. It's more improv, more co-op, and yes, a bit looser, but in the right groups, it can keep things moving and encourages players to think cinematically. It's not about my turn, it's about my moment. You are encouraged to pass the spotlight, lean into shared storytelling, and treat combat the same way you'd treat a dramatic scene in a movie. Pacing over procedure. And this can lend itself to some really cool co-op combos that are just harder to set up in D&D 5e. The system also strips back mechanical noise in favor of fictional impact. When you swing your sword or cast a spell, you are not just tracking a stack of modifiers, you're telling a story. And your domain, your experiences, your hope, fear, they all balance and shape the context of the role. The mechanics exist, of course, but they're never the focus. This makes Daggerheart exceptionally fluid at the table, and quite frankly, because there's less stopping to check the rulebooks and there's more room to just play, I find that even newer players are going to enjoy picking this up and master it quicker than they will D&D. And every system, from resource recovery to resting, exists to reinforce a narrative moment rather than slow it down. It's designed to feel like a conversation, not a simulation, and that makes it feel alive. When comparing this to 5e, it's important to understand that these two systems are designed for fundamentally different priorities. Dungeons & Dragons is a system of tactical balance, modular mechanics, and decades of iterative design layered on top of legacy crunch. You manage hit points, spell slots, action economy, initiative orders, feats, reactions, resistances, and more. Robust and flexible, yes, but also notoriously rule-dense, especially for newcomers or narrative-first groups. Daggerheart is almost a counter-response to that complexity, and it actively removes mechanical friction to let the story flow. You don't count movement in squares, well, you can, but it's more fluid than that. You don't juggle attack actions, bonus actions, and reactions. Instead, the system trusts the players and the GM to narrate dramatic scenes collaboratively. If you want to leap from a rooftop, cast Bolt of Divine Flame, and land with a speed that inspires an NPC to rebel, you just describe it. The mechanics are there to support that scene and not to define it. This fiction-first approach is both freeing and disorienting depending on what you're used to. I do have one complaint, and that it's that currency is measured so abstractly that I think it's kind of silly. A handful of gold coins is the base measurement, so does that mean a dwarf has more spending power than a Goliath? Now, the system does say that you can use coins if you want to, but just one silly, scratch moment that I found. Daggerheart, while mechanically shallow, still features traditional fantasy roles like rogue, fighter, wizard, etc., but flavored through a lens of emotional storytelling and narrative triggers, not numerical optimization. Sorry, Tony. Classes are supported by domains, which function like thematic schools of power. These domains grant abilities and spells that are flavorful, flexible, and grounded in the moment, rather than a hard-coded spell description. You're not casting Magic Missile found on 203. You're unleashing Ghostlight to pierce illusions or shadow, and how that looks changes based on what's happening in the story. And leveling up here in Daggerheart is far less about new math to memorize and more about growing your character's legend. That this will make leveling up less about paralysis and more about getting to the cool story that lies ahead. One of the really cool things here is that your character starts with and then can gain experiences as you grow, which change how you roll by giving you modifiers to the roll. In 5e, success often came down to how good your numbers are and how well you know the system. In Daggerheart, success is tied to emotional resonance and in-world choices. Are you burning hope to succeed at any cost? Are you giving into fear to fuel your domain? Are you risking stress or making a personal sacrifice to save someone else? For all its emotional elegance and narrative flow, Daggerheart isn't perfect though, and it's important to be honest about where it falters. The biggest hurdle for many players, especially those coming from D&D or Pathfinder, is that Daggerheart is intentionally vague, where other systems are intentionally exact. There's no initiative, no clearly defined turns, and instead characters take the spotlight and the GM is expected to manage the pacing intuitively. It can be liberating in a group that knows how to share narrative space, but at a table with dominant personalities, maybe newer players, or indecisive moments, the system can cause confusion and frustration. Without that structured combat skeleton that D&D relies on, rounds, initiative, reactions, etc., scenes might drag or become unbalanced if the GM isn't skilled at spotlight distribution. And to its credit, the game's rules does address that and give tips to dungeon masters on how to deal with it. Abilities in Daggerheart are designed to inspire creativity, not to resolve exact situations. So for example, a spell might say, create an illusion or banish fear. But what that means in mechanical terms is highly contextual. There's no grid, no area effect diagram, no rules as written versus rules as intended debate, because there rarely are strict rulings at all. That's a gift for someone like me that's narratively focused, but it can feel unsatisfying for players who like to calculate probabilities, weigh options, and build with efficiency in mind. Balance is another area where Daggerheart walks a thin line. Because it leans so heavily on fiction-first resolution, the system is inherently more abstract and less symmetrical than something like 5e, though I do have to give a big shout out to them for including a rather robust ability to calculate how punishing combat will be. And so we come back to the question that I started this video with. Is Daggerheart better than D&D? The truth is, I'm really excited for it, but it depends on what you're here for. If you love tactical combat, rigid structure, and the satisfaction of cracking the optimization puzzle, D&D still wears that crown. It's precise, crunchy, and endlessly moddable, despite all the hate I'm sure to get about it in this video that's mostly about Daggerheart. It's built for adventuring parties who want to slay dragons and loot dungeons, with exacting mechanics and decades of legacy content behind it. And to be honest, I still love it more than Daggerheart. But if you're looking for something different, something that feels like sitting around a campfire and weaving myths together, if you care more about why your character swings their sword than how often they can, if your favorite moments at the table are the ones that hurt a little, or heal something a little, or change how you see the story, then yeah, Daggerheart might be better than D&D. They're trying to ask two different questions. D&D says, what do you want to do? And Daggerheart asks, who do you want to become? Elegant, emotionally rich, and radically accessible. I'm sure it's going to evolve and have growing pains, but I hope additional content comes out for it and they continue to expand on the grounds of this breathtaking new system. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling those dice, and may your quests be epic.